and welcome back to the second half of our very last day of the National Youth Film and Animation School. We are joined by the delightful Áine McGuinness. How are you doing, Áine?
I'm very good, thank you.
Cool. Could you introduce us as to what exactly your role within the animation industry is?
So right now I'm working as an art director in Cartoon Saloon. So we're working on a feature film for Netflix, which is quite exciting. So yeah, I'm art director on that.
Amazing.
For now, yeah.
And what does the role of an art director entail?
It's mostly about developing the visual style of the film across all departments, and kind of supporting the director's vision for the film and creating artwork that supports the characters and the story.
Yeah. Cool. Like straight to the point.
Yeah. So it's kind of overseeing all the kind of visual aspects of the film, from characters, backgrounds, right through to comp and color grading.
Cool. Mm-hmm. And what was your journey into animation? Was it something you were interested as a child? Were you always doodling? And how did that progress from finishing school and further training?
Yeah, I guess when I was younger, I kind of grew up in the countryside, didn't really go to the cinema that much, didn't have comic books or anything, but so I'm not really sure how I was kind of attracted to animation first, but I just went through the kind of traditional route of secondary school, applying to different colleges, and animation just stuck out to me. I was always a bit of a doodler, but didn't quite know what direction I wanted to take that in. But something about animation stuck out to me, and I applied for it and just got in by the skin of my teeth. So I studied in IADT in 2004, and we had a very kind of talented class group, which was quite intimidating. I was quite young starting, and everyone was incredibly talented, and I was very jealous. But luckily they were all really supportive, and we had a very collaborative group, Padraig included. So we kind of supported each other and shared references and that kind of thing. So I think that was quite fundamental in my development as an artist, was having that support group. And
staying connected, I suppose. And especially with something like animation, art in general can be very comparative. Mm-hmm. And how did you build your confidence with your own work, especially like you said, within such a bright, talented group? How did you kind of develop your own confidence with your work?
Slowly. I wasn't a very confident artist at all, and yeah, like you say, you kind of compare yourself a lot to other artists, and you kind of look at like I used to look to like famous artists in like Pixar and Disney and stuff, and be like, oh, I want to draw just like that. But you're kind of comparing yourself to the best in the industry, and people who've been doing it for decades. So it's kind of setting yourself up for failure a little bit. And then, I suppose just kind of through the years of working in the industry and kind of learning and growing, I sort of just slowly developed confidence. But I think that's something that we all sort of struggle with. In general, as artists, I guess, like as artists, whether it's this industry or music or something, you're kind of putting all your love into something and all your hard work and time into something, and then sort of handing it over for criticism, whether it's like putting it online on a blog or something, or showing it to a supervisor or a boss or whatever. So you're making yourself quite vulnerable. So it is quite a hard industry in that sense, and hard to build confidence when you are. It is quite a competitive industry, but yeah, it just comes with time. I think
time and practice. I think as well, of being able to take your own perspectives on board as well as all the other voices in the room.
Yeah, and I think just sort of like with your personal work, just sort of focusing on what you actually enjoy doing instead of trying to replicate something someone else is doing. Like there was a certain point where I was trying very hard to kind of copy other people, but you don't really learn that much from copying other people's work. And I started just doing silly little animals with silly faces and kind of little monsters and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed it, and people responded, like this kind of thing, like people responded really well to it, even though like those ones are just like couple of inches, you know, tiny little watercolor paintings. But
do they have names?
Just their animal names. No.
I thought we'd have like George, Henry, and Peter.
Well, we have names now. But yeah, just by actually working on what you enjoy, I think is where you'll kind of find your confidence.
Yeah. With that, when you left college, was that a particular, especially when you were with this pod of supportive artists in IDT, to like move into like the industry, how do you overcome that kind of daunting kind of maybe space of misconceptions, or like an area that just doesn't really make a lot of sense, or was that supported through college?
Yeah, I suppose they were kind of preparing us in college for that, but nothing can really prepare you for getting stuck in. And I suppose that when we left college, it was 2007, it was kind of just before things started to pick up. So jobs were, like, there was a few knocking around, but it wasn't like as booming as it is at the moment. But I was lucky enough to get work straight away. And I think college prepares you to a certain extent for working in the industry, but it's really only when you get there and you start making stuff that you really properly learn, I think, skills, because you can't really get the same kind of experience without industry experience. So it was quite overwhelming. My first job was in Boulder Media. I think it was quite big at the time. They had a couple of different TV shows going on. And yeah, it was very overwhelming. I was quite shy, but I kind of, I was there for a year before moving on somewhere else, and just kind of learned and grew, and yeah.
You went in there as an animator then?
Character animator, yeah. These few shows are, Funky Fables was the first one I worked on, and then over the next 5 or 6 years I continued working as a character animator in Dublin, kind of hopping from studio to studio.
I suppose with like TV shows like that, there would have been quite a fast turnaround.
Yeah.
I think you improved an awful lot over that year.
Yeah. It was pretty intense. I remember like the first few scenes I did were awful, and I think my lead was just like, why did we hire this person? But you kind of get used to it, and like obviously your leads and your supervisors are there to kind of guide you along the way, and you're looking at other people's work and saying, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, definitely the first year was pretty intense, but it's good.
I always remember being quite terrified of, like, you know, actually getting a job in a studio, you know, that like, why would they hire me? You know, of course, once you actually go into a place, you know, you do get used to it. Like it's just a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, exactly, and you get to know people and stuff. I remember, I think after a couple of months in the job, in my first job, we were in a very small room, and I rolled back on my chair and knocked a wire out, and my lead's computer just went poof, and he just stood up and walked out of the room and didn't come back after lunch. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? I'm going to be fired, but I wasn't. It was just a mistake.
Did he ever come back?
He came back. We never spoke of it again.
Oh my God. I think there's like when you go into like a new job or a new space like that, it always comes with the things like you're so attentive, where people will be like, chillax, relax, it's all good. Like once you get in the flow of it, was there any kind of things that or tips or tricks you would give to any of our young animators about going into a studio for the first time, and what helped you adjust to that space?
That's a good question. I don't know. Again, I think it just took time and sort of like making friends and connections with the people that already work there, and they can kind of guide you along the way. You know, if you're kind of panicking about stuff, they can reassure you that everyone's kind of the same. Because animation is so collaborative. It's very much a team. You have to be able to work in a team. So I suppose just looking for support from the other people on your team and your supervisor. Like if you're struggling, just go to your lead or the production people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you were on character designer, was that?
I've done a little bit of everything.
Was that your first one though, for initial?
First job was character animation.
Character animation. with what exactly we might like break down, because you have this wealth of knowledge of like dabbling in everything, which must again support being art director now, of having an understanding of all kind of different departments. What does character animation entail?
Well, I suppose it's like kind of taking the storyboards and the kind of usually pretty rough poses that are in the storyboards, and pulling in, like the first few jobs I did, it was kind of puppet animation, so like in kind of Flash or programs like that, pulling in your character and kind of following the poses that are in the board, but then elaborating a little bit and making it better, giving the characters life, and that kind of thing. So yeah, and trying to, like, if there's a few characters in the scene, kind of balancing them with each other. And yeah.
And how do you balance the kind of that delicate area of what your assumption of what they're looking for is alongside what your instinct is, and how do you navigate that space?
Ooh.
Fun questions now today.
Yeah, again, I think that just comes with experience and like working with again your lead or whatever, because you'll get to know what they like, and often what you think is better isn't what's right for the show, so you have to sort of trust your supervisor to, you know, to be guiding you in the right direction. But yeah, a lot of it is trial and error as well. Like, you put something out there and they're like, oh no, that's not what we want, and that's fine. But yeah, I think when you're first starting a project, there's a bit of a ramp up where you're kind of getting used to the style and getting used to the director or whatever. But usually after a few months, you kind of settle in and figure out what's needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I presume kind of that introduction into somebody else's world, whether you're working on another TV show, you're adapting to this style, all these different characters, and a kind of a space away from your own work that you might have been focusing on in college. How did you kind of continue to grow artistically, whether it was like going home and doing your own doodles or working away on your own kind of separate projects? Was there a balance to that as well, or how did you kind of stay motivated in what you were doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is doing kind of personal work outside studio work, if you have time and kind of creative energy for it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're working an intense job and you just don't have the energy to be creative outside of work, and that's fine. But also, I tended to kind of do little freelance projects or helping friends out with little projects and stuff like that, and that kind of keeps it interesting. I did, after I'd been doing kind of character animation for I think 5 or 6 years, I sort of started reaching a plateau where I didn't feel like I was learning anything anymore. So I felt a bit like things had gone a bit stagnant, and at that point I sort of made a bit of a shift, just to keep things a bit more interesting. So, yeah.
And what was that shift into?
I went freelance for 2 years. I had kind of helped out a friend, Alan Holly, on his short film Coda, and I did some backgrounds with them, and the art direction was lovely on it, and it was quite inspiring. They were doing really independent sort of different kind of unique stuff, and I was like, oh, that's really nice. So I kind of just had a look around Dublin and what else was happening within the animation industry, and there was a little startup studio called Wiggly Woo. And they were just making fun stuff, like preschool stuff, but it kind of caught my eye, so I approached them about doing some work, and they took me on. So I worked on a few different projects with them as an animator again, but then doing a little bit of development stuff as well. But that did, like I had to go self-employed to work with them. So then after I finished with them, I carried on being self-employed for 2 years, and kind of did, in that period of time, I did so many different jobs, like every department. I did animation, I did cleanup, ink and paint, and I did a children's book as well. So it was kind of a very productive period of trying a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because often, like when I'm talking to younger sort of artists who are just getting into the industry, they're kind of putting pressure on themselves to specialize in something, but it's kind of hard to, like, if you don't know straight away, you kind of just have to try out a few different things until you figure out what's comfortable for you. So definitely in that period I was kind of leaning more into kind of concept-based stuff, kind of development work and that kind of thing. So.
And I think importantly what stood out for me there as well, when you did get to that stage of like plateauing in character animation, that you approach somebody else rather than the other way around. Would you have any advice on that side of when you are, maybe the young people here might want to in the future do freelance or independent work or approach other kind of studios to collaborate there? How do you go about it, and were you showing them art, and what took part in that?
I was kind of just lucky in that instance, but like I saw a tweet. Wiggly Woo were kind of they just put up I think it was a little teaser trailer for the day Henry met, and it was really cute, and then they were hiring for another project, and I sort of wanted to get in on the day Henry met, so I applied for this other project, and they got back to me, and it worked out. But because I had been working in the industry for 5 or 6 years, I'd already built up some contacts in some of the kind of smaller studios, so when I was self-employed then I was able to kind of take along just through contacts that I knew already. So I suppose building up a sort of contact base, if you can. Easier said than done. It did take quite a few years to kind of get to know a lot of different people, but through classmates as well. I got work through classmates who were working in various different studios too. So
that's really cool.
How did you find working in like a smaller studio like Wiggly Woo?
That's great.
Did you get to, I suppose you got to try your hand at different things like.
Yeah, I was mostly an animator because it was tiny. There was only 5 of us, I think, but it was really nice because I had come from a studio that I think they were at about 120 or something, and things start to get a little bit corporate and a little bit too big. So when I went to Wiggly Woo, they had like a little office on South William Street, and there was just a really nice atmosphere, and I did a little bit of development work with them, but mostly it was a guy who rigged all the characters and did the animation. I did the animation, and then Gary, who was the director, did most of the character designs and background designs, and then we had someone else doing kind of scene prep and stuff like that. So it was just tiny, but it was really, really fun. I like small teams, but I'm saying that now I'm in a studio where there's a couple 100 people, but
And how important, like, is there any important skills that you've taken through your experience, Áine, to work in such a big team, just from what you've experienced both from smaller studios to larger studios, alongside kind of the grafting of different kind of skills? What do you think stands out as important to communicate between all departments?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the through line, I suppose, is teamwork and communication. Like whether you're on a big team or a small team, you still need to be able to have a clear way of telling people whether if you're a supervisor or whatever, you need to be clear communicating down to your team what they need to do, or if it's the other way around, you need to be asking questions if something's unclear and kind of making sure that you have all the information that you need from your supervisor. So I think, being able to work in a team and communicate well with everyone, and if you're not sure of something, just ask. Because I think, early in my career I was very shy and would never ask anything, but maybe they can't shut me up. But that's probably the kind of the common thing, no matter what department you're in or what your role is. Communication is kind of the most important thing, I think, in animation, and teamwork. Delegating, not taking on too much yourself. That's also a common thread from this week of, I had said it to Alan Sashery, but Jack O'Shea yesterday was talking about how when he initially started and he'd get to a project and
it was his first time, I think, collaborating with other people, and he said, like, when it came to like revisions or something having to be met, he was like, oh, I don't want to stress out anybody else, I'll just take this on, or I'll redo it. How do you have any effective tools to like that kind of unwind that for you, that you don't feel a responsibility over somebody else's work, and being able to, I suppose, give information to other people and not feel the blame?
Yeah, I think the last project I worked on, Dorg van Dango, taught me a lot about that side of things, because it was my first time as a supervisor, and I wanted to fix everything myself and take on too much. But you know, you kind of reach a point where you don't have the energy, and you're kind of, there's a risk of burnout. That's Dorg van Dango there, the concept designs, and I think two big things. One was learning to delegate and trust your artists to do what you're asking them, and if they are not sure what to do, then you've communicated something incorrectly, so you need to kind of work on that. So I think delegating to your team and trusting your team, and then also having a good relationship with production, so your coordinator or your production manager, they've kind of saved me a little bit, because you know, they help you manage your time, and if you've got too many tasks, they can kind of break them down and break down the amount of time that you have for each task and stuff like that. So I'm notoriously pretty bad with time management, so when I started this new role that I'm in currently, I just said, look, I'm really bad with time, please help me with my calendar, and now they manage my tasks so that I don't get too overwhelmed. So leaning on production and leaning on your team, and not trying to do everything yourself, because you can't.
That's really good advice, actually, of being able to not almost hide your weak points, but actually ask for help on what it is that you need help with, because you can't be, although you are a jack of all trades, that there's, I think, being able to pivot and ask people when you need help is really good.
And it's okay to be vulnerable. Like, you can say, I'm bad at this thing, can you please help me? You know, or just ask for support where you need it. It's really important.
How do you think your drawing style has changed, like, over the years? You know, because I remember when we were in college, like, there were some people who were like, they came in almost like with this style that they already had, and they'd obviously been drawing a certain way for ages. And I think people like me and you, we were a bit more like loose, and or you know, like, you weren't necessarily obsessed with, like, you know, anime or something like that, you know, or comics, like. And I'm just wondering what has influenced you over the years, like.
It's actually interesting. I don't know if you remember when we were in first year in college, our tutor gave us a task, which was to do a drawing, and he said, you're going to do this drawing and we're not going to open it again until fourth year.
Oh, cool.
Partly because I've forgotten.
No recollection.
At the time, I had very low self-esteem, very young and naive, and I was like trying to do what everyone else around me was doing. So everyone was doing comics and superheroes. And if you know my work now, you know that that's absolutely nowhere near what I do. So I did this big muscly superhero. And he gave it back to us in fourth year, and I was like, oh my God, what was I trying to do? You know, so I think at a certain point I figured out, okay, I just need to be me and kind of accept that I do silly, cute animals, and that's fine. But I was definitely very influenced by kind of 1950s, sort of like Mary Blair and the Provensons and stuff like that. And for a while I did try a little too hard to develop that style. But after a while I realized, okay, I can do my own thing. And if I come up against a problem, maybe I can look to their work to see how they solved it, rather than actually just sort of copying what they were doing, as like kind of being influenced by them and referencing them.
I suppose understanding why they made some of those creative decisions, as opposed to just, you know, imitating for the sake of it. Like Jack yesterday was talking about like UPA and being influenced by that UPA kind of style, but not necessarily being influenced by, I suppose, the motivations that those artists had when they they made some of those creative decisions.
Yeah, and kind of recognizing in that work why you like it and what it is that you like.
Yeah, dissecting it a bit more rather than being like, that's amazing, I have to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's like, I want my art to look like that. And it's like, no, but that's someone else's. Your art is never going to look like that unless you're plagiarizing. So
yeah,
you kind of just have to learn to dissect the things that you want or that you like and that appeal to you, and then, yeah, figure out what motivates them and why they work that way and what you like about it.
Do you think the more you learned about animation as well, the more that kind of influenced like your design in terms of the way things moved? I remember like your film being very elegant and like kind of like minimalist, I think.
Elegant.
I cleaned it up with my exactly.
I cleaned it up with my left hand. I don't know, it's a sort of masochist. I don't know. I kind of wanted it to have this sort of wobbly boiling line.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of animated it roughly normally, like any normal human would do, but then when I was doing the final line, I did it with my left hand so that it would have this sort of...
That's so cool!
It's kind of a trick, an exercise that we would have done in life drawing a lot as well.
Yeah, actually life drawing, it was a big influence on me as well, particularly Laura Venables kind of pulled me out of myself a little bit in terms of confidence, because I was trying to do these perfect drawings and everything, and she was just like, nah, stick a bit of charcoal on a bamboo stick and draw with your toes, so she kind of ego went out the door when you did a class with her. So I think she was definitely a big influence on me in just kind of loosening up a little bit. I
totally forgot about stuff like that, those kind of ways of breaking out of the usual way that you draw. You get so trapped in little habits that if you use your wrong hand or
blind drawing or something like that.
Drawing.
And I still use that as a go-to, like, when I'm kind of a little bit stuck creatively. You've kind of got the blank page facing you. Sometimes I'll draw with my left hand, or I'll just draw a plant or something. Instead of trying to come up with new ideas, I'll just draw something that's in front of me and I'll use my left hand, or I'll do it blind or whatever, just to kind of take my brain out of the equation. I think that's a nice kind of exercise to loosen up a little bit.
That's a really good idea, actually. It's like, I don't need to do that. I just need to like draw this plant with my left hand to, especially when you're in that kind of area of like either creative conflict or something where you're just, it's not moving, it isn't happening. And it's something that the animators watching at home have expressed through the week, of like when the pen won't go to paper, or you can't get it to look the way you expect it. So is it you drop it and walk away, or is there other kind of mechanisms that help you when you get to that stage?
When you get into a funk?
When you get into a funk.
I've developed sort of go-tos. So often when I'm in a funk, I'll do a little animal, like those little animals that I showed. I'll just do them, and they all start the exact same. It's like a circle that's about the size of a €2 coin, and then I just stick a tiny little body on it and then decide what the animal is. And it's very basic and very simple, but it gets me drawing something. So it doesn't matter how good it is or what it is, just the fact that I'm actually drawing something is kind of what I'm aiming for. So
they're so cute.
They just started randomly. I did a couple and people thought they were cute, and I started giving them as gifts to people. And then I started doing them custom for people. So like if someone reminded me of a particular animal, I'd do their animal, or if they had a dog, I'd do their dog or whatever.
How long have you been doing those for?
I did them for, there was a period of a few months where I was doing I think I set myself a challenge. I think it was like April or something a couple of years ago, and I did one every day for a month, and I started giving them away and stuff. Just as it was actually to get out of a funk, I was like, okay, I'm going to do one thing a day. That's how it started. So I still my sketchbook is still full of them, because they're my little go-to guys. So.
I remember Kieran Duffy was also in our class, and who has worked in cartoons. Didn't he go through a phase of painting very small canvases and like with animals and things, and leaving them in public places, just for people to find?
Yeah. He had these. It was like foam board, I think.
Yeah.
And he kind of cut up little pieces like a couple inches wide, and did little mini paintings on them, and just left them on the street. and people picked them up, and
Oh my word.
it's great. And he just put his email on the back so people could kind of let him know if they found one. And, yeah.
That's so
Kinda cool.
It's ingenious, really, for what frustration you can get in a funk, and it's where you have no trust in your ability. You've lost all faith. You're like having like an existential crisis, and it's so wonderful to hear like the different things that people can do, and it's like you take on like a tribe of little animals that are gonna like help you get out of an area of like brain fog. It's really cool.
And sometimes it's good to know as well when not to force yourself, because you might be like, oh, I need to draw something I haven't drawn in weeks, but maybe your brain just needs a rest. So just, sometimes I just go for a walk or something instead, because you can't put too much pressure on yourself to constantly be producing stuff, especially if you're working at the same time. And if you're working in the industry as well, you're putting all your creative energy into your job, so you can't be expected to do that also when you go home. And that's kind of the sacrifice we make when our hobby is also our career. So it's important to know when to step away as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
somebody wants to know, is that short film of your college film online anywhere?
No, I killed it. I think it's on YouTube, but I hid it or something. It like this has gone back 15 years now, so no, it's hidden. It was called Popine.
Popine.
Yeah. It was kind of a coming of age film as far as I remember. It was about kind of finding yourself and self-acceptance a little bit.
Kind of reflects your journey through college as well.
Yeah, I think at the time I didn't realise that's what it was, but that's sort of what it was.
And you're outside of yourself when you came to that realisation.
Yeah.
Is there anything through the years that you are super proud of? Whether they were difficult projects or it was kind of difficult with the team that you're working with, whether just different challenges were presented. Anything stick out over the years that you're proud of?
I think there's something to be proud in everything you do. You can always take away something from a project, even if it went badly. You can still kind of be proud of how you handled a difficult situation or something like that. I suppose I worked on Late Afternoon, which is Louise Bagnall's short film, and I think that was quite challenging because it was very low budget, very short turnaround, and we were a very small team at the start, but we were just collaborated really well and kind of sort of managed to make a really successful short at the end of it. So I'm quite proud of that one. And then, like, I have to say probably the most proud I am is right now, because I've just started a role in January as art director, and it's kind of my dream job, but in being my dream job, it's quite overwhelming because you're like, oh no, I can't mess this up. This is all I've ever wanted. And I'm working with, someone who I really admire and respect, Nora Toomey. She's one of the people that I most admire in the animation industry, and alongside Louise as well, she's the assistant director on the film. And I only started in January, and the project is already in production, so I kind of took it on halfway through and sort of had to kind of hit the ground running a little bit. And so I started in January, so I've been in the role 8 months, and 5 of those months have been COVID, working from home, trying to manage a huge team, a team of people who are kind of stressed, and there's a lot going on with each individual. So kind of working with the team and being able to hold that together and still make a film currently is, I'm quite proud of how we're doing that and how we're managing. So yeah.
Absolutely. And especially in a time of COVID, animation seems to be like you're working away underneath all of it, that projects have still continued within production, which must be very, very challenging.
Yeah, but I guess we're kind of lucky in that sense that we still can work from home, like unlike live action, of course, which things had to halt mostly.
Yeah.
A lot of industries did, so I do feel quite lucky at the moment that we're still able to continue working away. Yeah, it's challenging, of course, but it's happening. We're doing it, so something's going right. Yeah.
Would there be anything that you do as kind of a habitual thing, or maybe something pre-COVID that inspires you or continues to keep you inspired with your work? Whether it be like going to festivals, or do you go to like watch other people's work to
Not
kind of
so much.
instigate ideas? Yeah.
I used to kind of keep more up to date, but I think the project I'm on at the moment and the last one were pretty intense, so I was just kind of focused on what I was doing and not really following other people so much. I think just generally I'm sort of just inspired by kind of nature and stuff like that, so try to go on a lot of walks and things like that, go up the mountains, clear my head for a bit and sort of be inspired by that. I wouldn't be one, like I'm not a crazy avid film watcher or anything like that. Quite particular in sort of my taste when it comes to films and stuff, but I do, probably the thing I am inspired by most is children's books. Actually, I buy a lot of children's books and follow kind of illustrators online and stuff, so I would take a lot of inspiration from those.
How did you find when you did those illustration books? How did you find that, like jumping onto that from having worked in the animation industry for so long? Was it
It was amazing. Yeah, I put some of the slides there for Megan the Vegan, which was when I was in that kind of freelance 2-year period. The last project I did was this picture book, and it was amazing because the author, it was just kind of friend of a friend, sort of put us in touch, Alan Holly again, and he basically just gave me complete creative control to do whatever I wanted. He had no revisions. I even had an input in the format of the book and stuff like that. It was great. And then, and even these are the dust covers. So I did the inside covers and everything. So I was kind of just in my element. And then at the end of the project, I was handing over the files, the final files, and he was like, "Oh, can you just, separate the characters and the backgrounds out for me so that I can do some motion graphics to make a promo trailer?" And I was like, "What?" So I was like my animator's heart was going, "No, you can't do it. I'm a trained animator. I can do it." So I convinced him to let me do the promo video. So I did like a little 30-second animated kind of thing to promote the book. So yeah, that was great. It was very creative because it was all me from start to finish. Yeah, it was great.
Were you working in Photoshop mostly?
Photoshop, yeah. Yeah. I even animated it in Photoshop like a lunatic. Photoshop and Flash.
That is lunacy.
Yeah. I can confirm.
But you survived. Also, you say Megan rather than Megan.
Yeah, that was one thing I didn't have control over, because the author is very passionate about veganism, and the story is all about a little girl discovering where meat comes from and deciding that she wants to be a vegetarian. Yes. And I had actually, it kind of randomly sort of coincided with a period where I had gone vegan, so it was kind of fitting. But yeah, I think she's called Megan because it rhymes with vegan. And I think in the US they say Megan, maybe.
I think with a slight twang, all right.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that wasn't up to me, so.
Is there other pockets or kind of branches of your work where you've kind of stepped out? So you've stepped out to do your illustrations, but probably more from a headspace kind of area, and you've dabbled. Has there been any, should I say, moments or like pockets before, obviously art director, where you're in your dream job and you're trying to figure it all out, that you've gained the most experience from, maybe?
Not particularly. Yeah, I've kind of had a fairly steady sort of path, kind of like navigating different kind of departments and roles and stuff like that, but I haven't really branched out too much from anime. Well, I did a diploma in writing for children's books, but it was like a little short-term, part-time kind of thing. So that was the only kind of branch away from animation that I took. But it sort of feeds into animation anyway because it's storytelling. So it was just storytelling with words rather than visuals.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've gone off track of what your question was there.
But I think that answers it, that you kind of, that was the only kind of space where you were like podding away from animation, but yet made perfect sense, and then kind of bled back into what you're doing now. Has there, like, I know you've taken part in Kilkenny Animated for young people. How does that influence your work, being able to like kind of communicate with other younger animators and helping them kind of map out that space that was kind of like misty for you when you were younger?
Yeah, those kind of things sort of happen randomly. It's not something that I kind of was like, I really want to talk to young people about animation. It just sort of happened.
Yeah.
Like I've done a few of the open days and stuff up in the studio. But it is interesting, you kind of hear the same sort of questions and concerns from young people coming into the industry. But yeah, that wasn't sort of intentional really, just kind of happened. But yeah, it is nice because like when I picture myself back then when I would have been listening to someone in the industry, it's kind of, I'm trying to always think of, okay, what would I want to know? But it's hard, like it's so much easier to look at things in hindsight. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I suppose it was after that period then when you were like dabbling in different things that you kind of could move into doing background work.
Yeah, yeah. Right after that kind of freelance period, I got work in that's when I started with Cartoon Saloon and came down to Kilkenny. But I applied for background work, but I hadn't got a lot of experience with backgrounds. I'd done kind of my own sort of illustrations and stuff, but I hadn't actually worked on a production other than Coda. So I applied for backgrounds and didn't get it. So yeah, the rejection is a big thing to learn about animation as well. It happens occasionally. So I didn't get that, but they offered me a test for posing, animation posing, which I did get. So that was kind of doing sort of the main key poses for the characters in each scene and sort of putting them on model as reference for the animators. I don't think I was very good at it because it was, you know, feature film, it was much higher standard and it was kind of, I feel, a little bit above my skill set. But I did that for 8 months and then a position opened up again on the background team and then I got in. So it was really nice because the breadwinner was traditional painting. All the backgrounds were traditional. So I remember on my first day sitting down with my paints and my paintbrush and just like, you couldn't wipe the smile off my face. I was so happy, which is weird because it's a film about the Taliban, but it's still, I was incredibly happy. And I was working with Kieran Duffy, who's very inspiring, another classmate, but also very talented art director as well. So yeah, that was kind of getting more into backgrounds again. And then after that came late afternoon. So going from, yeah, just there's a lot of meandering here from department to department because then I did concept work on late afternoon and then I worked on a TV show, Pete the Cat, and I did concept work, but then I went into characters and prop design and then I went into backgrounds. So it's kind of just yo-yoing all over the place. But I think I like variety. If I'm kind of doing the same thing for too long, I get a little bit itchy. So I like to kind of bounce around, which I think is partly why I've kind of leaned into art direction because it's sort of a little bit of everything and it keeps a lot of variety in what I do. So yeah. I
suppose all that experience you have feeds into it as well, of course.
Totally. Yeah, because I think for art direction you sort of need to have an overview, a broader overview of the whole animation pipeline and different departments and kind of have a little bit of understanding of what they do, even if you don't completely know what they do. Sometimes I don't. It's good to have like even a surface level kind of understanding. So that's why I kind of refer to myself as a jack of all trades, and I used to see that as a very negative thing because I was like, oh, I can do a little bit of everything, but I'm not specialized in anything, or I'm not really good at anything. but it's actually not a bad thing at all. It makes you very versatile and very employable.
It's sort of like what I know obviously you've done like a lot of work since then, but sort of like what our course was like in college actually. It was more of a like generalist kind of animation course, which I don't know, people have different feelings about. Like some people really wanted to have the opportunity to focus in on one thing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of rare now, that kind of course where you do make a film and you make it all yourself, you know, from backgrounds, animation, comp, everything. Because in the Cartoon Saloon, like we get people from all over Europe, and most of those schools, they, like after first or second year, you kind of zone in on something and you kind of, you figure out what you want to specialize in. But certainly in third year of college, I wouldn't have had a clue what I wanted to do. So I think that style of course suited me to do a little bit of everything, but yeah, it's not for everyone. Because it is a lot of pressure if you have to make a film and you're like, I hate animation though. And I was like, well, you have to make a 2-minute film, so yeah. Cool.
When you were working on The Breadwinner and you finally got back into like the backgrounds and they let you in, what was your reference point in going for like creating landscapes like that? And you said that you were using your paints, but I know that's not always the case. And how do you make those worlds that you might not have ever, like you can't go, oh yes, I remember when I was in that part of the world. Yeah. Was there reference pictures, and how did that process work?
Yeah, because they couldn't go there. It wasn't safe. It wasn't safe to go there for a reference trip or research trip. So there were a lot of kind of reference material, like photographs from other people, and art, you know, because a section of the film is this story world, so that was kind of inspired by that sort of artwork. But you know, Kieran was I'm not sure how he did it. He was background supervisor, layout supervisor, and co-art director all at the same time.
How do you do all of that?
I don't know. But he had, you know, built up like a really clear style guide and references, and each painting you did would have its own mini brief and description and any colour references that were required. So it was all kind of set up for me just to sit down and with my happy face and paint away. I think just planning on the part of the supervisor.
Yeah.
So what was the atmosphere like then, I suppose, working on a feature film as opposed to a TV show?
Yeah, it's very different because it's the standard is so much higher and you're kind of working with the best artists in Europe sort of thing. So it's quite intimidating. But I don't know, like I think the team there was just very collaborative and very open. So it kind of, within each department, it felt like a small crew. So it didn't feel too overwhelming. Like you're always kind of comparing yourself, like looking at your own backgrounds and another person's backgrounds and be like, oh, mine aren't as good. But you're doing your best. So, you know, once you're doing your best, that's all you can do really. But it was super exciting to be a part of a feature film, you know, because especially having gone for many years on TV shows, just to work on something of that scale and of that standard was a big challenge and very rewarding as well.
How many years were you working on it, or how long?
On Breadwinner, I think I did model sheets for a couple of months and then posing for about 8 months, and then backgrounds, because it was the tail end of the background department, so that was like 4 months or something, so just over a year. But yeah, I came down to Kilkenny for 8 months and haven't left yet, so 5 years later.
There's a question in here about any tips on doing backgrounds. It's my weakest point, and do you have any advice for starting off and for making them look nice and, inverted commas, tidy?
Nice and tidy. Well, you don't have to be tidy. You can do experimental kind of messy stuff if you want. It's hard to say really, because that's kind of a broad question. I suppose like something for me, and I'm still learning myself, is, an important thing with backgrounds is balancing your values. So like where your dark points are and where your bright points are, and where you want people to focus their eye. So if you've got a character in the middle of the screen, you want to kind of, maybe that's going to be your brightest point in the background. So you can kind of use your values and your tonals to kind of direct the eye where you want it. And then, you know, kind of balance your colours around that. I think colour balance as well is quite important for just simplifying an image, because if you've got all the colours all at once on a background, it's going to be hard. Like the eye is just going to be so interested in everything. So if you kind of simplify your palette, I think that kind of is quite appealing. Unless you want to go for something sort of psychedelic or something, then that's different. But in general, I think kind of choosing your colours carefully and balancing your values kind of makes a good background.
That's super advice.
I mean, as a broad
Yeah.
thing, you know, it's hard to really specify. But,
Yeah.
I suppose on any project, I suppose you'd do a kind of a pass on the boards in terms of like planning out how the colours change from the start to the end, would you?
Yeah, I suppose depending on the project, like for a short film or feature film, you usually have colour script, which is like an overview of the colour through the whole film. And then like currently with the feature film that we're working on at the moment, per sequence we'll do we'll have a colour script, and then we'll develop that into colour keys. So you'll have kind of a rough thumbnail for the palette for each scene within a sequence, and you can see how it's flowing before people go in and spend 2 days actually doing a background. So you can see that it's working already ahead of putting in all that work. Yeah. But yeah.
Do you have any tips on receiving criticism for your work, and how to inadvertently in your head turn it into like constructive criticism, or something that you can work towards?
No, you just reject all criticism.
Reject.
Yeah, I think criticism is a tricky thing because it depends on how it's delivered. Because if it's coming from a supervisor or whatever, and they're saying, okay, this image isn't working because of A, B, and C, then it's good to break down those points and kind of understand why they've been given. Even if you don't agree with them, it might be better. Like your supervisor might have more knowledge than you have, because they're the kind of in between you and the director. So you kind of have to trust them. So I think just break it down and make sure you understand the criticism, instead of just looking at the list and going, okay, I'll do A, B, and C. You kind of break it down and see why you're doing those things, and that'll kind of help you understand as well what to avoid in the future. So I think just asking questions as well, if you're not sure why you've been given a certain note or whatever, ask if you don't understand it. So again, kind of coming back to communication. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you can get negative criticism and people can be a bit cruel sometimes, but yeah, don't let that get to you. Because that goes back as well to making ourselves vulnerable by kind of putting our heart and soul into what we do. You are making yourself vulnerable to criticism, but yeah, I think just question it, break it down and make sure you understand it.
I suppose as well you would have had, like in college and after college, you kind of had quite a good group of people around you, who were kind of doing quite similar things, like yourself and Louise and so forth. So I mean, it's probably helpful to have some friends like that, I suppose, that you can bounce things off. Do you find that? Or?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've been quite lucky in the people that I've been surrounded with. I haven't had too many negative experiences within the industry, but yeah, like bouncing stuff off your colleagues for sure is great for kind of understanding how to improve and learn, especially if they're more experienced in a particular area than you. But yeah, again, that comes back to the kind of teamwork aspect of kind of working with other people, and yeah, talking to people to improve.
Yeah. And do you, like, I know you said Nora's a huge kind of inspiration for you. Is there anybody else whose work kind of makes you go, whoa, or like that you aspire towards their work ethic, or maybe not necessarily like style, or you you don't want to be them, but they emanate like really positive traits that you'd look for in your own work and your own kind of new space in your role?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like admire a little piece of everyone, I think, because like everyone has something different that they're bringing to a project or whatever. But certainly Nora and her sensibility and her skill of storytelling is quite inspiring, and she's very caring as well with the team. So she's great at collaborating. Louise as well, big inspiration. I think at the moment I'm very lucky. I'm working with like a great team of like very strong women as well. Like all the heads of departments and a lot of the supervisors are female as well, which is great to see in the industry, because I think when we left college it was very male dominated. So working alongside women who are kind of finding their voices in the industry is really great. And I've worked with an artist, Rosa, who I worked on Dorg van Dango, and now on My Father's Dragon as well, quite closely. She's a concept artist who's been with the Saloon for a number of years, but her hand is literally on every single project that they do. You can see a little bit of her artwork, and she kind of, she just has this like amazing skill of like, if she's designing like a bedroom, for example, she'll think about, okay, who's in this bedroom and what kind of character are they, and like what would they have in their bedroom, and she questions all the little details about the character. So she's really immersing herself in the world, and she just has an amazing eye for detail. So she's a huge inspiration to me, and luckily I get to work with her pretty much every day. So I think I'm just kind of spoiled at the moment with the team that we have. So
very much so.
But yeah, I also like I was saying, I always look back to kind of Mary Blair and the Provensons and kind of illustrators like that who, you know, still inspire me and always will. I think just that's more of a style thing, I guess. But
yeah, the Provensons, they were like were they a husband and wife team?
Yeah, Alice and Martin, and Alice died there a couple of years ago. I was kind of heartbroken, but she was like 96 or something. But yeah, just for the rich imagery that they provided, and incredibly productive as well, like huge volume of work in their careers. So yeah. And Mary Blair, there's a bit of a theme there as well. It was like a woman in a very male-dominated industry. So
maybe we didn't talk about Mary Blair actually. She was a designer for Disney, wasn't she, in the 50s?
Yeah. Color artist, did a lot of concept work for some of their big films like Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan and stuff like that. So really gorgeous color palettes and stuff like that. So
okay, Áine, if you could give one tip to young animators, and maybe it's advice you would give to your younger self, maybe it's something you've learned through your years of experience, of like parting advice. Oh God, what would it be?
The pressure.
A bead of sweat.
I think it would probably be, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You know, like to find a style or whatever, it all comes with time. To specialize in an area, it all comes with time and experience. Comparing yourself to others isn't really going to do you any favors. I think just take your time, and if you enjoy what you're doing, it'll all kind of naturally work out. Very optimistic.
That's very optimistic. But I think it's important sometimes, especially when you said to be optimistic when you're entering that space of vulnerability. Because if you think with your art you're going to enter that area with everybody kind of ready to fight you down, then you're already against yourself then. But yeah.
I think just, kind of taking care of yourself. So not putting too much pressure on yourself to succeed or to do anything, but taking care of your health as well. Like it's quite an intense industry that we work in, with like tight deadlines, a lot of pressure. So just make sure you take time for yourself, take time to rest. I'm a total hypocrite, I never do this, but take time to rest, because if you don't take time to rest, you need to make time to get sick. And burnout is a very real thing. I've seen a lot of friends and colleagues kind of burn out a little bit because they're kind of overworking, putting too much pressure on themselves. So yeah, just take your time. It's only a job at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Try and enjoy what you're doing, because we are in a very fortunate position of our hobbies being our career. So enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that wisdom on board as well. Just from everybody in Young Irish Filmmakers, a huge thank you for your time. The ability to kind of dissect all of your experience and give us the best, most helpful advice moving forward. And just thank you to all the young people who are watching, because this is our very last day. So we're going to go rest, look after ourselves, and yes, thank you everybody for taking part. So I think all we have to do now is a wave goodbye. Goodbye, good friends, goodbye.